Greetings and welcome to In Depth. I'm Dike Rostant. On the 24th of June, a few days before his July 1 birthday, Chief Secretary Farley Augustine would have submitted a budget statement for fiscal 2025 titled Unlocking Tobago's Development Potential. We get a little insight into it with a financial analyst, Mr. David Walker, at this point in time. Mr. Walker, how are you doing, sir?
Good afternoon. I'm very good, thank you. Thankfully, the hurricane passed us by, so we're all in relatively good shape.
Well, that is one of the questions that I wanted to ask even before, because one, how you're doing, how those that you in your circle, and three, how different would this projection or this submission be if there was more of an impact by the weather phenomena or the weather system?
Okay, first of all, let us acknowledge, thankfully, that there was hardly any impact, even on Tobago. You know, we were warned that Tobago might get the tail end of it. Hardly got anything, a bit to the north of the island, but nothing major. I understand a few people had to be evacuated from their homes, but that sounds like about it. So we have to be very, very thankful. I have a personal interest, as you know, in the north of the island, but even more than that, Hurricane Beryl coincidentally has the name of my mother, my deceased mother. So there was a bit of sentimentality to it. I think she looked down on us and decided that she would spare us.
Again, when we look at this, this budget put forward by Chief Sec, what are some of the things that jump out to you from first blush?
There's a host of things. I'll give you the major one. There's always the issue of how much money Tobago is going to have at its disposal in order to achieve the things that it says it wants to achieve. And then inevitably you have to revise that, revise your plan. So spending a lot of time analyzing the plans as they are now is likely to be futile to some extent. However, it does give us a sense of the direction in which whoever is the ruling party wishes to go. The eternal claim is that we are seeking development. You know, we've been hearing that every year for the last, 20, 30 years. I don't see that we've achieved that development, and therefore, one of the major things I am looking at is what really has been presented that would give us some hope that there would be some significant development. And also, what do we mean when we say development? Is it simply building some schools, putting up some buildings, roads, and so on? Or is it developing the economy, which is where I would like to see the focus, so that Tobago doesn't just hold its hand out for money every year. Tobago should be able to generate a significant amount of the money that it needs annually, and it does have the resources to do that. So perhaps we could spend a little time doing that.
And I want to look at those resources, but just before we go into that though, I want to ask you if you share the sentiment that there's a difference between growth and development, in the sense that growth speaks a little more specifically to money and increasing what it is you're earning, what it is you're working with in terms of that sort of resource. Development has a component that seems to be more focused on people. What are some of the things that are being put in place, be it a social aspect, be it or to ensure that capacity is built? When you say development, so that we kind of lay the ground, we can set our parameters, what are you speaking about specifically?
I agree wholeheartedly with that analysis you just gave. Development can be subdivided into a number of areas, and I think you started to allude to that. There is the development that really, I would say mostly infrastructure, that generates no monetary return that can be identified against that expenditure. So we have to find other ways to look at and to justify that expenditure. We seem to be pretty good at justifying expenditure on that type of development, but with no metrics that we could examine 2-3 years down the road to ask, have we achieved what we set out to achieve with that? Even worse is the type of development expenditure that's really about investment. So that both in Trinidad and Tobago, we have state-owned enterprises. State-owned enterprises, for the most part, really should be there in order to generate income that assists us in doing the other things that we want to do. And we have to define those things clearly and to be able to measure them going forward. You will be aware, and I think most viewers and listeners will be aware that I have been involved over the last couple of years with one of the enterprises in Tobago. And it troubles me that it has not been able to achieve what I certainly anticipated that it would have achieved over, the 2 or 3 years since that this current party has been in power. So that was one of the things I wanted to hear. How is that going to be turned around? How are we going to start turning the state-owned companies into revenue earners, so that not only do they not stick their hand out to the state every year, but they also contribute to the state. Again, going with the example that I am most conversant with, the Studley Park Quarry. Studley Park, frankly, should be earning $2 million a month right now, because we have the market in Guyana. We simply have to get our house in order to export. Opportunities like that don't come around very often. We need to exploit it, and I'm waiting to hear how they propose to do that.
But is it a matter of using everything? Because it seems as though, with that same example, Studley Park, as much as Studley Park can produce on a given time frame, so like say per month, it seems as though Guyana would want to purchase all that it can produce. So how do you not necessarily curb your enthusiasm, but make sure that, yes, you're earning, but you're also using those resources for the betterment of the space that they're in?
The answer to that comes in several parts. The first, and perhaps the most significant for me, is that we should be looking at taking a holistic look at the quarrying industry in Trinidad and Tobago. So that it should not just be a case of what happens to the products coming out of the Park quarry. We should also be looking at the material that's coming out of national quarries in the Northern Range. So that Northern Range should comfortably be able to supply Trinidad, so that we have the capacity then to export almost all of the Tobago aggregate to the lucrative Guyana market. Now, there is a standard policy in place where the first and most important clientele for the Studley Park quarry are the Tobago resident buyers. The guys who have a small hardware shop, even the builders who come along and want a truckload or two. Those are the most important customers, and you will be aware that in the news recently they've been unable to supply even that. So that tells a story in itself, in that where you see that they are unable to supply what is regarded as the absolute, almost sacrosanct market, it tells you that they aren't able to supply anything else. It would always have been a challenge for even a quarry with as much potential as Studley Park to supply aggregate sufficient for Trinidad's needs, given the work on the Point Fortin Highway, the extension to the Point Fortin Highway, the road to Toko, and so on. If you have huge demand there already before we can supply Guyana or elsewhere, which is why it is critical that there is a working together with national quarries, so that national quarries is able to supply the local market, which incidentally will turn national quarries into a profit center in Trinidad as well. So we all benefit. If Tobago is to be burdened is perhaps too strong a word, but required to supply all of the needs for Trinidad before it supplies Guyana, they will always struggle. They will not be able to produce the quantities that are required for Guyana. And it is a uniquely lucrative market presently, which will not last forever.
And one of the things that I look at is the fact that in terms of looking at and the city kind of base, I may be wrong, but one of the closest is Montserrat because their volcano complex is offer that kind of same sort of structure. But at the same time, you're also looking at the amount of distance because Trinidad to Guyana or Tobago to Guyana is very different from Montserrat to Guyana. But we continue the conversation when we return. We are speaking with financial analyst, Mr. David Walker. Stay with us. We come back after this. Welcome back. We are speaking with financial analyst David Walker. The premise of the conversation is the submission, the budget statement for fiscal 2025 coming out or presented by the Chief Secretary, Farley Augustine. And one of the things in terms of looking at state-owned enterprises, and I don't want to belabor the point, Mr. Walker, because there are other things to speak about that should be earning, and you use the term potential. What are some of those other things that should be able to provide turnover, that should be able to provide a little more resources?
I am going to take the liberty of introducing some of the concepts that I have spoken to others about and which I have been promoting myself. I do not believe that we should simply be following the lead of other islands into the space that they already occupy. And I know that this is going to be controversial, but the mere fact that given circumstances, we ended up not having any large-scale development on our seafront, I think is an asset. I don't think we should be running away from that. I don't think we should see that as a negative. I think we should spend time analyzing the global travel market currently and projected into the future. There is a significant market now which is moving towards more sustainable development. People are looking for establishments that are almost blending into the community rather than the big 400 and 500 room establishments. So given that we don't have those big ones already, this is my strong belief, and it's supported by a few others, that we should be looking at the market that we are best placed to exploit. I think we should also exploit some of the things that perhaps haven't been understood. There was a speech by the Prime Minister recently where he was fairly critical of the surfing community. The surfing community generates several $trillion of revenue annually. If we got 1,000th of that in Tobago, we would double our tourism income. So what I'm getting at is that we need to look at what really is our strength. It seems that we don't understand the markets outside there. And I have a personal experience as well. I was returning from the UK to Trinidad and got stuck in Heathrow because we were snowed under. And I happened to be sitting, you had to sit overnight in the airport, next to two travelers who were coming to Tobago. And I could not believe or understand their enthusiasm to come and watch butterflies. Tobago was like the holy grail to them. And you see, once you understand that, you understand that there's a market there. The butterflies and the birds in Tobago are world renowned, but we don't promote it. We don't promote the undersea space in Speyside and Charlottesville. That is what I personally would like to see. I know there are other people who have other ideas. I don't think we should just go down the beaten track. We need to not just explore, but exploit all these opportunities for which we are well disposed.
With that, there's this look at community empowerment, youth development, and sports. There is strategic investment in physical infrastructure. But looking at the physical infrastructure, how do you build that? Because you spoke about having things blend into the part of the community. one of the reasons I love Castara is because it is a little less touristy than other spaces in Tobago. And we just go and we're there as opposed to you go to play tourist. But also managing and looking at, okay, well, things need to be developed because they're more individual, so we need to cater to them. So how do you blend that while still trying to go forward and get this kind of median?
Well, let me start by giving credit where credit is due. In his speech, the Castara model was mentioned as something that he wants to see emulated across the island. And I think that is hugely positive. I have been talking about Castara for a long time. Even when tourism numbers are down, Castara is full. Simply because they offer what their customers want. And let me take a personal bow here. If you walk to Castara, possibly up to about 1/8 of the people will be walkers. The Walker clan has come through Castara, originally from Barbados. So I have a deep, deep, abiding love for Castara for personal reasons, but also for the way they handle their tourism efforts, the way they treat the tourists, which I'm sure is part of what you are reflecting in your conversation. So yes, we can all learn. So I'm in favor, and I believe it will work if they genuinely sit with the people of Castara. I could tell you some of the things that make Castara work. One is their support for each other. If your establishment is full, you send them to your cousin or your friend down the road. You don't say, well, the place is full, and leave them at that. There is a spirit in Castara that I hope can be replicated throughout the island.
But there's the adage that you need money to make money. So in terms of trying to get money or resources to have some things operate at a level where they then you then get return on your investment. What do you think this submission speaks to the most in terms of saying, okay, well, this is what we're working towards, and this is why we need this, so we get it, as opposed to having the argument that every time and we put this forward and then you say, okay, well, it's a well-balanced budget, but we don't get as much as we need. So we're not able to take this as to the point that we want to. How do you respond to that?
My first point with that is something that a lot of people will take exception to, but I feel very strongly about it. We do not make best use of the money that we get. We need it to be truthful to ourselves and examine our plans, our implementation, our execution, our reporting in order to make much more, much better use of the resources that we get. And I could give you examples. There is, for example, what they call the vendors mall in Charlottesville that costs over $20 million, that stands there virtually idle, earning, if the vendors receive $1,000 a day in sales, they receive a lot. It speaks to the inability down the years to allocate the resources as effectively as could have been done. The other thing that I would say is that there is a simple argument to be made. If $1 million is invested anywhere, forget Tobago for the moment, anywhere, and is generating a 20% return, governments will invest in it. We have to make the argument on the basis that what we're going to spend the money on will be productive and to the long-term interest of not just Tobago, but the Twin Islands state of Trinidad and Tobago.
And 20 minutes would never be enough time to go through this entire submission, Mr. Walker. But at the same time, what is the point that you want to make, that you want us to leave with while we have about a minute and a half to wrap this conversation up?
If I have to give one most important point, it would be that coming off that last thing that we spoke about, is that we need to really do a deep dive into how we spend the money that we get. Yes, I would support the argument for more money, but let us ensure that we get maximum value for what we do get and spend it effectively so that we generate more money so we need less next year and the year after that.
Right, and I guess this has not been the first. It will not be the last conversation. But we want to thank you, Mr. Walker. And now we know the familial connection and the link through Barbados as well. So thank you very much for the time. And on behalf of the entire TTT News team, this has been In Depth with me, Dike Rostant. Thank you so much for joining us.